Oh yeah, this 2-Minute Tuesday is going to go hard. It's time to talk Stagg. As I've said before, there's certain profiles that I really like, even in the I'm a self-acclaimed tater fan level of whiskey. Stagg is one of those, as is probably a little obvious. And today, what we're going to do is compare 24A, 24B, 24C, and 24D. Now this is 2025, but Stagg 24C and 24D did not hit Washington State until effectively 2025. We're always a little behind everybody else. I just got my 24D about a week and a half ago from the Bourbon Baller Lee. This is quite literally the first ever Stagg I've gotten at MSRP. Stagg is pretty hard to get at MSRP in my state. I'm just going to put it out there. But I'm a really huge fan of the profile. I have since I found my very first batch 18 in the wild, and I ended up collecting quite a bit ways back. I have 9 all the way through 24D, and then also a batch 7. I'm missing a batch 8. Got one? Anyway, we're going to talk about Stagg and comparing the 4 batches from this year. So if you are looking for one of the 24s, which one should you look for based on the parts of the Stagg flavor profile or off-profile Staggs that you might like? So with that being said, we're not going to mess around. Each of these is kind of a different monster, and let's get into them. 24A. We're going to find kind of a similar thing here with each batch of Stagg, and that the color is pretty similar, and typically viscosity is very, very good. It's hanging on the glass really, really well, and that's nice. Let's get in the nose. Ooh, there's a little ethanol. You're going to get that with 127.6 proof. But what you also get is a much more oak forward and a lot of honey out of a Stagg. That's not normally something I get. Usually I get big fruit forward profiles, and most Staggs are kind of typically 2 to 3 notes for me, but they're very in your face. And the more that I kind of sit here and nose this thing, there's like a tiny amount of pear in there, but really this is a big like honey and oak monster. Let's see what it tastes like on the palate. Oh yeah. Dude, I know I said honey and oak, and I mean this. Honey oak in all the good ways. There's nothing tannic about it. It's hanging on really good. It coats the mouth well. Maybe you can see those legs a little better now. It's not bad, man. This is just really like 2 big in-your-face notes. There's a little bit, the more that I get into it, of a little touch of like some pear. So think of like a kind of a cooked pear that's got a ton of honey on it and a whole lot of oak apparently. But really, to me, this reminds me of the one time I was at the Samoan barkeep's house for one of his birthday parties, and somebody brought a bottle of Lot B to share. And it was just all this wonderful honey and oak, proofed down, right? Not as proofy, where this feels like the barrel proof, slightly less refined monster version of Lot B, where it's just very in your face, very honey and oak forward. There's definitely a little bit of your barrel spice. It comes off kind of cinnamony, which is a little more common in Staggs. I would say it's kind of a cinnamon finish, and the finish really hangs on nice and long. That's one of the benefits of Stagg, is usually that extra proof helps it hang in there quite a bit at barrel proof. I don't know, man. This is delightful. Other than like it's only two notes and it's kind of off profile, I think this is a fantastic batch. They really started 24 off nice, man. Whew, that's a good one. I don't think I need to hem and haw too long in this one. I'm going to get to the overall score, 83 out of 100. This is great whiskey. It's certainly not, you can't possibly miss this level whiskey, but I feel like all Staggs perform well. And if this is how they start the year off, I know some people had felt a little more lackluster about the 23s. If you like that honey and oak kind of profile that you get out of, say, like Weller 12, or if you've been lucky enough to try Lot B and that's what you've gotten out of Lot B like I do, this might be the kind of in-your-face monster version that you're looking for. Let's see how that compares to 24B. Alright, 24B. Again, that kind of great dark color. And let's see, I don't know if you can see the legs, but again, this is really hanging onto the glass pretty well. There are some good legs coming in. I would expect that out of most barrel proof Staggs. Very similar in proof at 127.8. That nose is way different. This is more like what I'm used to in the Stagg profile. So this got like a very, rather than like kind of fruity cherry, like the fruit itself, this is more like you cooked down a bunch of cherries until you got this like really rich syrup. And then there's this great molasses cookie thing that's going on beneath that. Yeah, it's kind of like a molasses cookie drizzled with a bunch of cherry syrup. In the dark, we're talking like Bing level cherries where it gets real dark, little deeper sweetness to it. We gotta taste this thing, see how it compares. Oh. Yeah, right away, there is that cherry note right up front. It's just punching through hard. and then it gets into that kind of darker, what I would say is like a molasses cookie. If you've had molasses cookies, you know what I'm talking about. That molasses cookie kind of sweetness that's going on. It's not as confectionery or bright fruity as a lot of other Staggs tend to be sometimes, but this is dark and rich and kind of like screams winter to me, if I'm gonna be honest. This is really good. As it gets kind of mid-palate-ish and toward the finish, I get a little bit more kind of like Christmassy baking spice thing going on, and also a bit of influence from the oak. Although really, I think it's kind of that molassesy sweetness. When you get good sweet oak that comes in and not tannic, they can kind of be, for me, like brown sugary and molassesy. I'm digging this, man. This is like some kind of the dark Christmas cookie of a Stagg, and I'm had that a lot of winter weather, and I'm digging it. This is definitely better than 24A. It's a Stagg. It coats the palate pretty well. It's not quite as like when I look at the glass, the legs aren't quite as amazing as 24A. It just hangs on, and that finish is there for a nice long time. It's really good, and I would say that this is more along what I want in a Stagg, and I got to kind of judge it accordingly. I'm going to go 85 of 100 for our overall score. Yeah, this is great. I mean, if you prefer like some of the cherry notes, this is a little darker, more, like I said, kind of syrupy, or maybe like if you've ever had dried Bing cherries, it's a little more like that. It's not quite like bright red or like Rainier cherry kind of thing, but if you're in on that profile, 24B is really, really good. This is going to be hard to top. Let's get it at 24C. Again, very similar, lovely color. This is really grabbing the glass, like better than both the previous batches, so that usually is really good. Get into nosing. So this is 128.9 proof. This is much more ethanol forward than the other two. There's a little like kind of apple cinnamon thing going on. Not like apple pie, but more like a baked apple that you've covered with a lot of cinnamon. And I mean a lot. There's quite a bit of cinnamon here, but it's that ethanol still really punching through a lot more. Kind of the deeper I get in on the nose, there's this little bit of like a cooked plum, and I don't want to say stewed, because when I think stewed, I usually think something that's got some extra influence with it, right? Some extra, whether it's spices or something. It just tastes like something that was cooked down a little bit. It's very faint. We'll see how it is on the palate. The ethanol is not as strong as it is on the nose, but this is really cinnamon forward. There's a little bit of apple and a little bit of that plum still. More of the apple than the plum. The plum's really light. For how strong the nose was as far as like that ethanol forward, this is much more muted on the palate than I would expect out of a Stagg. I mean, it's very cinnamony. Kind of reminds me of the one time I tried 2023 GTS at a bar where it was just like all up in my face cinnamon, and I wasn't a big fan. But I think if you liked 22A, which to me was like a kind of like apple pie-y kind of flavor profile, you might dig this. It does not coat the palate nearly as well as A and B did. The viscosity looked really good on the glass, is not as good on the mouthfeel, and the finish is significantly shorter, and it's almost purely cinnamon. And if you don't like a lot of like cinnamon, like baking cinnamon, not hot cinnamon, in your whiskey, I would not go with this, because it's very cinnamon forward. Maybe this is one that just needs to open up more. This is one outside the usual Stagg profile for me, in that kind of cinnamon apple plum thing that's going on, and mostly cinnamon. It's not nearly as sweet as the other two are, and they have very different sweetnesses in their profile, but this is very mellow also, so maybe it's going to open up a lot better if you don't want the bigger, bolder, in-your-face flavors that Stagg usually is. Why are you drinking Stagg? But overall score, I'm gonna go 75. When I go to Stagg, I want big, in my face, like 2 to 3 flavors, and I want them to just like punch me. That's the reason why I drink Stagg, is I want these 2 or 3 flavors to just really hit me hard and carry me through with a nice finish to really enjoy that kind of barrel-proof whiskey. This isn't it, man. It just doesn't hang on nearly as long as most Staggs do. Its viscosity looks really good on the glass, and its color looks great, but the flavor profile is a little muted. The nose is really ethanol-y. It's not as like fruity or sweet or oaky as some of the other Staggs are. It's very strange for a Stagg. It's definitely not what I would expect anywhere in the profile, even the off-profile Stagg. So, yeah, I mean, I guess maybe if you don't like the standard profile Stagg, maybe this is going to be up your alley. But for me, not a big fan. C's kind of let down compared to A and B. Hopefully, D will turn up the table. 24D. Before we get into any judging, Baker Drinks, Glenn, what's up? I'm just going to give a little shout out to my friends, Troy and Laura at Baker Drinks. They do phenomenal live streams, the Trash Palette Challenge, and a bunch of other cool things. Go check them out if you haven't already. You probably know them, but if you don't, check them out. And, if you also have a WhiskeyTube channel and you want me to either vaguely sponsor and shout you out, then you have a Glenn, send me one. Otherwise, these hats. That's what I do. I don't do t-shirts. Sorry, it's just not my style, but you got a Glenn or a hat, let's talk. All right, let's get into it. Color's great as always. You got this wonderful, like, kind of deep auburn caramel thing going on. It's got some good legs right away. Let's get into the nose. That's okay. Hold on. This is not like any normal stag profile at all that I've ever had. This is like it's not very ethanol-y, and that makes sense because it's the lowest proof at 127.4 of the bunch. But what I do get out of this, and what I'm really digging, is this is very like orange peel, kind of citrus, and like star anise forward. Ooh. There's a great, like, dark sugar sweetness in there, too. But it really is very citrusy. Man, that star anise, that's different. That's really different for a stag. You know what this smells like? I'm going to tell you a small story. I know, 2 minutes, but I went to Vegas a few years ago with my wife. I had this old-fashioned at the Mayfair Supper Club before going to my friend's wedding reception. And it was this amazing, probably the best old-fashioned I've ever had in my life. And this reminds me of it, because there was a little bit of spice going on in it. It's like that orange and the kind of star anise is made into a nice thick syrup that's used as your sweetener and your spices to add to whatever bourbon you're putting in an old-fashioned. Digging it. Palate. Yo, everything that's on the nose is just hammering the palate in all the good ways. This is not, I mean, it's warm. It's got that nice Kentucky hug thing going on, but it's not like punching me in the face in a painful way, that kind of ethanol forward way. The star anise and that kind of orange peely citrus thing that's going on are big upfront notes. This really tastes very much like the kind of old fashions that I like the most. A little bit of citrus. Sometimes they're hinted with a little bit of spice to make them a little extra and a little different. This nice, like, wonderful kind of demerara sugar thing going on for its sweetness on top of that citrus, and then just hanging on. It's this lovely, warm, that kind of baking spice, star anise influenced finish is just going down, and it's just hanging in there, and hanging in there, and hanging in there. This is not a normal stag. You might need to find this thing. I'm just saying that right now. Dude, this is a monster. This isn't the normal, so like the best stag of the kind of non-junior versions that I've had is batch 18, and this, while not even nearly close to a profile, this is hitting like that does, where it's just, it feels a little special, it is delicious, it's a profile that punches me in the face in all the good ways. Overall score, say 87 out of 100. I mean, this is... I can't... Yeah. I need a backup of this bottle because this is really, really good. And I'm going to take this to shares and it's going to get annihilated. This is great. Yeah, man. I mean, this, I've been very fortunate in the last about year or so to have a number of different like monster whiskeys. Considering Stagg has been doing 3 and now 4 batches a year, this thing feels special. It really does. And man, I'm sure like, you know, those people with like really crazy palates, your ADHD whiskeys, your Fred Minnicks, they're probably not going to appreciate this the way I do, because I love something that's more like 2-3 notes, but I get to really just practically bathe in them is the way I want to put it. And this, I think this is the best one. For me, 24D, the king. This is really, really good out of the 24 batches. Now granted, if you prefer the more like cherry or grapey forward type of stags, this is not going to give you that. This is not that in-your-face cinnamony kind of thing that can happen in some stags. It really takes almost everything else away from your palate. I think like the 24C we had, right? Whereas cinnamon is the dominant note and the fruits are kind of subdued. This is like a barrel-proof cocktail ready to rock, but heavy influence on the bourbon side of it because, man, the flavors are great. It's simple. It's kind of like an old-fashioned on steroids for me. And but none of the cherry. I know some people love cherry in their old-fashions. I'm actually a person who typically does not put a cherry in my old-fashioned. I know I'm a weirdo. This is good. And this might rank up pretty high if we do like all the stags in like some kind of bracketed tournament, if you will. Should we do that? Let me know in the comments down below. If you want to see that, we can do that. We can do that. I've got a bunch. I don't mind drinking some Stagg. I'm just putting it out there. It'll just take me a while. That's a lot of whiskey. If I were to rank them all, 24D, just a little bit ahead of 24B, just a little bit ahead of 24A, and then 24C is kind of down there. I don't think 24C is like necessarily a great stag. I know a lot of people like really did not like 23B, and I think while it's definitely not the same profile and why people didn't like 23B, I think it's kind of similar in how I would rate it, in the sense of like it's very much not what you expect at all in a stag, and even the off-profile stags, in a way to where I would kind of shy away from that one, unless like you want a more subdued and gentle. You don't want that big in-your-face kind of monster that most stags are. If you prefer something that's a little more subtle and soft on your palate, it might actually be really good for you, because for those of you who have like palates that like pulling out more subtle notes, that 24C might be like kind of an interesting ride to go on. Where me, I like, when I'm drinking a Stagg, I want something that's just like in my face, a monster, right? And this is what the rest of them really are, and all for different reasons, which I think is really cool. A is very like lot B at barrel proof. B has got this cool like molasses cookie with a bunch of cherry syrup or dried cherries on it, and it's very like Christmas cookie wonderful in the way that I like it, not the iced sugar cookies. I'm a molasses cookie during Christmas kind of guy. I know, weird. I embrace what I am, okay? And then, C, it's kind of got that apple pie-ish vibe going in that like apple and cinnamon, but it's not really as like luxurious and buttery and pastry like as a pie crust is going to give you. So it's kind of more like a baked apple with a whole lot of cinnamon thrown on top, and then maybe a little bit more because too much. And then we get to D, which is really just reminds me of like what I love in an old fashioned, the kind of citrusy note, a little bit of spice to it, that long kind of wonderful lingering hug, but very bourbon forward. And for that, you're gonna give me a barrel proof Stagg that tastes like an old fashioned right out the bottle. Yeah, I'm gonna drink probably too much of that. Yeah, so there you go. Have you had any of the 24 batches? What did you think? Were they better than the ones you had previously? Were they a letdown? Was there one that, did you get the kind of similar notes to me? Did you get completely different notes? I really want to hear from you guys in the comments down below. If you've enjoyed this video, if you like seeing reviews like this, please give it a like, and maybe also in the comments talk about what you'd like to see reviewed next. Do you want to see another Zero or Hero, or we go with a common shelf variety whiskey and give that a review? Or do you want to see some of the crazy allocated nonsense? As always, my friends, thank you so much for watching, and stay awesome.